बहुत शुक्रिया इस सेशन में participate करने का, and we are very fortunate we have a distinguished panel to talk about issues that I think are of deep concern to Afghanistan, to this region, and to the wider international community. As you'll see from the title of this session, which is Making Deals with the Afghan Taliban and its Fallout, so I will pose a question, really, to each one of our distinguished panelists, and then give them another chance to come back on this discussion before we decide to open the discussion to the floor in the Q&A. So let me just start off by asking our good friend Omer Zakhilwal, who was the former finance minister of Afghanistan, who was the former Afghan ambassador to Pakistan, but even more importantly in the context of this session, he was a key player in the IntraAfghan dialogue for peace. Now, what was that all about? And is there any chance of an intra-Afghan dialogue leading to a sustainable peace in Afghanistan? Clearly, when we're talking about making deals with the Afghan Taliban, we will start off with that particular landmark agreement, which was the Doha Agreement. But it was supposed to be followed by an intra-Afghan agreement on what the Afghan state should look like, which clearly did not succeed. What went wrong, and what could be put right? The floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Samina. I'll come directly to question. After the fall of Kabul till today, the sense within the Taliban that they have taken over by force, and that the whole country is under their control and they remain the strongest force, and there's no one else within the country to challenge them. They don't really need to negotiate with anybody. Even if they opt, maybe not now, in the future, for inclusivity of some sort, it doesn't have to be as a result of a negotiation. It is what they can give out to others. That is what is prevailing. From the international community, again, there's not much of a pressure on that front either. It's mostly focused on the immediate issues, which is, again, girls' education, women's work, which is certainly making lots of news for the right reasons. So pressure on that front, engagement on counter-terrorism particularly, focus on ISIS and focus on Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups still believed to be, to have some elements in the country. And only in passing mentions inclusivity as if that is important to the international community. On the other side, the non-Taliban political leadership remains fragmented, even politically. For them to be reckoned as a coordinated, organized force backed up by people is not there. And no doubt for the right reason. Again, as much as there is a lack of a larger acceptance of the Taliban by the general public is also angry at the political leadership who led the state to collapse. Like I said yesterday, the Afghan state collapsed not because of the strength of the Taliban, but because of the weakness of the Afghan political leadership. And that bitterness is there. Having said all that, I don't really foresee any serious negotiations because Taliban do not see the need for it. And on the other side, I do not see any sort of united front. I do not see that, at least in the next year or so. But in the longer term, I do believe that the Taliban will find it difficult. Not only that the way they are going, international legitimacy and international recognition is something they desire and they will have to desire, and it's not coming through. But they will also find it difficult that internally governing, fighting a war is much easier than governing a country. And that doing it alone is not that easy. And there will be opening up. I remain optimistic, and that optimism keeps us in Kabul. That optimism pushes us to engage with the Taliban, even though if they don't listen today, to show flexibility for inclusivity, political inclusivity, and again, flexibility on issues that matters to the Afghan population, education, work, opportunities, freedoms, basic rights and all that. But the fact that we could get that audience to cross our, so to get our points crossed, get a conversation out, that by itself is, I see as positive. I look at it from that. And the further we go in, the more conversation we have, again, the more flexibility, at least in the discussions, we see, not yet in actions, but our hope is that eventually it will lead to that. Thank you.
Just the issue again of flexibility. Is there an appetite for reform? I think I've asked this question so many times to Mahbouba, but I think that answer needs to be heard again and again and again, which is there an appetite for flexibility amongst the Taliban leadership? And if there isn't an appetite for moderation and flexibility, how grave is the fallout of making deals which then do not have either the approval of half the population of Afghanistan, women and girls, the support of the Afghan people? Were they consulted when deals were made with the Taliban, or deals are being made with the Taliban? And if you have half the population left out of any negotiation process, which is what we see effectively on the ground right now, what then is the fallout for that country and its people? Mahbouba.
Good afternoon, everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm glad to be here and can talk about this. In my mind, to tell you the honest truth, because of the way this whole thing has been arranged from day one until today, I don't really see any flexibility nor any need for it by the Taliban. If I was in the place of the Taliban, and the world gave me all of this possibility the way I wanted to, the game I played, the way I wanted, I got everything, nobody said no to me. Hey, why would I want to be flexible? Right now, I have access to money that I can give it to my soldiers and to the people I want to. I have access to food. I have access to a fantastic life in Afghanistan that I always wanted. The houses of all of those people that they are left, I'm occupying. I'm living a good life. Maybe once in a while they don't let me travel, but even that can be arranged. And it was arranged before, and everybody was going everywhere. So to tell you the honest truth, I don't see why they should be flexible. Flexible for what? To give a right to the women of Afghanistan? Why? They don't even believe in women. They don't want to see women around them. Women don't exist to them as far as they are concerned. So they want to be flexible for what? That is where the whole problem is. Because of the way the whole thing was set up. First of all, the world and the Americans talk to the Taliban without Taliban talking to the people of Afghanistan. Okay, when you put something like that as the first priority, that's how it should be, then hey, how come suddenly the people of Afghanistan are getting very important? They are not, as far as they are concerned. Because they have lived, they have run, they have done everything that they wanted to the way they wanted to. So I'm terribly sorry if I have to say that there is not going to be any appetite, nor any flexibility. And at the same time, I want to say that maybe the world thinks that they do have this, the winning card in their hands as far as, not recognizing them. I don't think they really care. Because the countries that they want to be recognized by, they already have, they already talked to them. So, I'm sorry to say there is no flexibility. Thank you.
One of those countries that you're alluding to is quite obviously where we are sitting right now, which is Pakistan. And unlike the first Afghan emirate, the Taliban emirate, this time around Pakistan has not recognized the Taliban regime as yet. But I want to talk to Afrasiab about just that issue. Deal making was done, quite obviously, by Pakistani power brokers with the Taliban. Again, not necessarily with the inclusion of elected representatives or a wider civil society support for the process. What has been the fallout of that deal making, in particular to the region that you belong, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? Afrasiab.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to welcome our esteemed Afghan friends. Both of them are dear friends and very respectable personalities in Afghanistan and here also. And I really respect their opinion, because it is their voice which should be heard first and foremost. But I would just, as a student of Afghan history and Afghan politics, I would just say that unfortunately, Afghan conflict has not been de-internationalized. It remains to be part of the big power great games, even now, as we are speaking. You see, Doha deal, I met Afghan delegation, American delegation, Mr. Khalilzad and his team in Islamabad in October 2018 when they were here. And they asked my take on Doha negotiations. There was no deal at that time. I told them that why didn't you include Taliban in Bonn process? That was the time. Had you included them, problems would have been, there would have been no problem. You kept them out and now you want to bring them. I told them there will be no peace. You want to exit, it's your right, a sovereign country, but why are you empowering them? Why are you legitimizing them? Why are you giving them political capital? But unfortunately, big powers have their own interests and their own game. So naturally, they went ahead with Doha deal, and now we are having a situation in which, of course, for Pakistan, it's very important because Taliban is basically the project of Pakistani generals. It is also very closely connected with our internal politics. Because when Ziaul Haq wanted to push back 73 constitution, he used the name of Islam. It was the only name which he could use for pushing back the constitutional order. And even today, as we are speaking, our generals, when they interfere in politics, they use this Islamization and Taliban. So Taliban were sent from here, unfortunately, from Pakistan. The production factories produced them here in this country. So, and then they talk about TTP and Afghan Taliban. They are one organization. There is no TTP. I mean, this is a joke. Basically, it is one Taliban. There are some Pakistanis who were part of Afghan Taliban, but they were, I mean, Taliban, not sort of Pakistani Afghan. They have the same ideology, the same leadership, etc. So now they're here, and I'm not prepared to accept that they have come by their own. They were invited. They were brought here. You see, how could they come? For example, Swat. Swat is far away from the Dhillon line. How could they enter Swat? They entered Swat. First they entered Bajor, they entered Dir district, and crossing those areas, they came into Swat. Where was Pakistani state? Where was Pakistani security forces? So you see, they were brought in. They have handed over Afghanistan to Taliban, and they want to hand over Pashtuns in Pakistan also to Taliban. You see, that is the tech. You know, Pakistani government says that 70,000 Pakistanis were killed. Okay? Give us the breakup. Who were these 70,000s? When we have a breakup, 95% of them are Pashtuns. You see, this is not going to work. And now when you, I worked in Awami National Party, you know, for 6 years I remained provincial president of Awami National Party. 1,000 activists of that party were killed by Taliban. 1,000. Not even one individual was prosecuted. The state could not protect us, but that was, as if that was not enough, the state could also not prosecute a single person for the murders of Pashtun political activists. So Pashtun, here also, so Taliban is basically an anti-Pashtun project. As far as we Pakistani Pashtuns are concerned, we regard it. But the only light at the end of the tunnel is that 60 million Pashtuns in Pakistan have collectively realized that Taliban is an anti-Pashtun project, and it is supported by usurpers in Pakistan, dictators in Pakistan, who wants to impose their dictatorship in Pakistan. They are using Taliban against democratic political parties for political engineering, for election engineering, etc. So people have come out, and people are far ahead. Political parties lag behind because there is spontaneous uprising from Waziristan to Swat, Dir, Kurram, Waziristan, Bajor, everywhere, Dir, Swat, Bunair, there have been uprisings. People have come out. They say no to Taliban, no to terrorism. You see, I think this is good news. This is the best news. And that's why they are on the back foot. Had people not come out, I can tell you, Taliban had started holding courts, parallel courts to Pakistani courts. In Banu, in Swat, in other areas, they're calling people to come to their courts, and they should accept Taliban's decision, court decisions. So I'm not going to continue this, but I would just like to say that the people of Pashtunkhwa have rejected this so-called negotiations and deals of Pakistani generals with Taliban, and they are not going to accept this. And this is also, the last point that I want to make is, it is part of the new great game. I think US and West Europe wants to contain China. They want to block China's corridors from Asia to Europe. And they want to open a new front for Russia in Central Asia. And they want to use our area, they want to use Pashtun blood as they used in 1980s. So This is a great game. Again, I think it's not good for Pakistan, so we reject this. And we look forward to peaceful Afghanistan and friendship between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Afrasiab. Powerful words, and I'm sure reciprocated on the other side. Peace between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and peace between the Afghan and the Pakistani peoples. And we do have one participant who will be here virtually. We linked up with Jasteena.
I'm here.
Oh,
Can you see me?
wonderful, wonderful. So, apologies for the delay, but it's really pleased to hear your voice on, I think, an issue which we've been discussing here over and over again, and you're an expert on the subject, which is the challenges to access to justice for women and vulnerable groups. When we're talking about the fallout of deal making, then quite obviously this is one of the most challenging issues that Afghanistan faces. You work with, or you help to advise UN Women on how to access these vulnerable groups, on how to deal with the changes to the laws that have been made by the Taliban. So could you tell us a little bit about what the challenges are right now, which is the obvious fallout of this deal making, and how is it that any space can be regained to protect those rights?
Thank you. And I am on video. Can you see me as well?
We can see you, yes, go ahead.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I apologize that I'm not able to be there due to the fast timeline turnaround. It was impossible to get the visa from Canada, where I'm sitting right now. And as you pointed out, Samina, thank you. I'm consulting with UN Women, but I have over 2 decades of experience working both within and for Afghanistan, for various Norwegian Refugee Council, the United Nations, and an academic from Harvard. So I am closely connected and engaged with everybody there, and have been, in particular, since August 2021, which is the remit that myself and my consulting partner, Razia Syed, have to work with UN Women to advise them on ways to engage. And I say engage without saying with whom, but engage in order to be able to understand how the changes in laws and the impacts on the most vulnerable, which include women, of course, but there are minorities and others of the change. So just as a first intervention, I will say that the results that we are seeing a year later, but even a month or 2 into the new leadership, or the new de facto authorities, as the UN calls them, is that there's been a marginalization and exclusion of women from all sectors of public life, and a shrinking of women's decision-making power in their private lives. And this is well known to the speakers and probably a lot who are listening. In my review of what's been happening, a list of decisions, events, and actions that have been taken by the leadership in current leadership in Afghanistan have disengaged women from, or are attempting to disengage women from laws and the ability for them to advocate for themselves. Nonetheless, they are still doing that. So I want to make it clear that it's that women are speaking out, and at huge cost. Now, you asked me a specific question, so I'll give you 4 specific answers. What we've seen and what we're advising the UN is major structural changes to legal institutions. For example, the reduction in size and the renaming of a specific department within the Attorney General. It used to be called the Attorney General's Department on Elimination of Violence Against Women. That name has changed. And as the previous name indicates, its role was to investigate specific cases of domestic violence and sexual assault. And with the reduction and renaming of that department, as you can imagine, that's no longer their priority. There's also the abolishment of key ministries and commissions that are there or were there to protect women, MOA, Ministry of Women's Affairs, and of course the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission, whom my partner Razia represented as a commissioner, but she's now in exile. There's also the restricting in many different ways of the Afghan Union of Lawyers, or as we may, understand it from different jurisdictions, a bar association, from doing a few things. One is giving licenses to women who have successfully completed their law degree, revoking current law licenses of women, and prohibiting women law graduates from taking their bar exams. Now, I need to say one thing, which is officially the Taliban authorities have not and cannot exclude women from participating in the legal process as professionals. However, they are putting up major roadblocks and challenges, as I mentioned before, revoking law licenses, restricting the ability of women to sign up for the exams, and even as far as saying there aren't enough desks or places for you to sit your exams. So effectively eliminating or reducing the participation. And of course, as we know, many women judges and legal professionals have left the country because of fear of their life. The second major area are revisions, reversals, and abolishment of laws that were in existence for even prior to the 20 years that I've been engaged in Afghanistan, but also were considered successes or achievements during the last 2 decades. For example, there are obviously the reintroduction of strict implementation of some practices and approaches within Sharia, Zina, Qisas, Bad. When I say strict implementation, I say that because Afghanistan is an extremely diverse country, and in many areas, especially when I was working there was still the engagement of and the use of Sharia law in many ways, but there was a balance, and I think that this balance is shifting. There's also some official adoption by as was mentioned earlier by one of the previous speakers, Taliban courts. So there is like a parallel system going on, which again, in some areas was already going on prior to this, but not in the harsh way maybe that it is now, which is that even buildings that were used to house courts are being used, as courts to hear cases using religious decision makers. And this has been reported widely. Now, there's also the introduction of the official use of the Ottoman Civil Code of Procedures for many civil laws.
Yep.
Finally, as the last point I'll mention, which is that there's the weak implementation of law. So as was pointed out by Mahbouba, and other speakers, the idea of the in a way welcoming or openness to the authorities, which of course, they replied by issuing what appeared to be, acceptable approaches. For example, if you look at the December 3rd, 2021 decree, where the Taliban affirmed the rights of women.
Jasteena, we're going to be running out of time very quickly, so if you could just wind up.
Well, basically saying that they are not holding up to their own commitments, and there are political reasons for that. So when it comes to the official changes in laws and the bolstering of traditional practices that keep women away from public life, like the overuse of mahram and some other things, it makes it impossible for women to participate, and the fallout, that is the fallout of giving that much power to that kind of a system. Thank you.
Very much. That's extremely useful, because what I would really want to do is very short interventions now from all our expert panelists on, which is something that we've asked repeatedly. And I'm going to start off, in fact, with Mahbouba. What we have heard about from this forum, from people like yourself, is the courage of women of Afghanistan. Is the courage of women of Afghanistan. And regardless of how much a regime is imposed in Afghanistan, can it be sustained? That's my question to you. Can I go through all the other panelists as well? And then we'll do it virtually with Jasteena. Omer, the deal making, you were very familiar with what happened in the past, and unfortunately we see the fallout of that deal making. What kinds of deals should the internationals be making right now so that this fallout doesn't do more damage to the country, its citizens, and to the international community? And Afrasiab, you talk about the courage of the Pashtuns, the rejection of the attempts made to reassert Taliban control over the Pashtun heartland. Does this civil society movement, or should this civil society movement, need the support of other than just the Pashtun people? Jasteena, very, very briefly for you, to you, because really we are talking here about primary stakeholders, is what can UN Women do? Very, very briefly, to tell us what can UN Women do, given the fact that the Taliban are running the entire show. I'm with Mahbouba. Please.
Thank you very much. What can the UN Women do? And what can the world do? What can anybody do after what they have done? And this is the result of it. Really, what can they do? That's a very good question. But you see, unfortunately, the world goes on and does whatever they think is right for them without taking into consideration that whatever decision they are making, what kind of an effect is going to have on the people that these decisions are going to be implemented on. I'm really sorry about that, but that's the name of the game these days. The one thing, however, I want to mention, lately with the Taliban, with all of the things that Jasteena said that has been, removed from the systems that have been broken down in Afghanistan, the Taliban are doing it in such a way, this breakdown, without even thinking 1 second about it. Because once they start thinking about it, then they realize that they really do need all of them. This is the funniest part. The reason why I'm saying is because the homes that I have, which are the shelters for the abused women, that was the first place they wanted to get rid of. That was the first thing they wanted to remove. That was the first thing they didn't want it to have. I stood firm, but what I believe, and said, no, this is needed in this country. You will see how it's needed. Today, they have turned around and they have realized that they really do need it. And now they are asking me shall we start building it other places in Afghanistan? And I said, yes. But you see, this is what actually makes me furious, is this. Because from the entry, they think that anything with the name of women and a woman protection is wrong. So let's get rid of it. Ministry of Women's Affairs was working for women, so let's make it, the other ministry. But why? If you wait a while, the needs of the society, these are the things that were built because the society needed it. And if these people could wait and see and just question. So that's why one of the projects that I have, and maybe UN can really help on that, is to do an introduction of the civil society to the Taliban. That's exactly what I want to work on. I want to reintroduce the civil society. Taliban have absolutely no idea what civil society is. What is the need of it? Why it should be there? Why a country needs civil society? But we really have to start reintroducing it and talking to them to say, hey, come on, guys, you really need us. And this is important. So one of the things that UN Women can do is this, can really work on this, so the civil society is reintroduced to the Taliban. So we can sit down and talk and see what's happening. Because I still do believe that we can solve some problems in this world. I still believe, actually, most of the problems by just having a discussion about it. Taking guns and killing each other did not work. Thank you.
That's a very powerful statement,
Yes,
and I think something that we heard from Omer earlier on, which is the need for that dialogue. Omer, but what about the dialogue that outsiders should have with the Taliban in a way that minimizes the damage to Afghan citizens and to the Afghan state?
I'm going to repeat just that one sentence from yesterday, that the Taliban are a reality of our country, and they should be accepted as a reality by the international community, and I think they have been accepted as a reality by the international community. In fact, before the collapse, too much of a reality, perhaps. And therefore, the same way that I discussed that engagement with the Taliban nationally was important, engagement by the international community with the Taliban is also important. We need to find a way to again live together with the Taliban, govern together with the Taliban. Another cycle of war is the last thing that the Afghan people need, and the Afghan people have the appetite for. With respect to the international community, at least since the collapse of the state last year, I would say they've gotten it largely right. The engagement is there. Assistance to the Afghan population continues. The UN offices have been strengthened. Other NGOs are there, and they encourage international organizations, NGOs, to operate in the country. Restrictions that will affect the lives of people more than what it has already been affected have not been imposed. That's good. When it comes to deals, the Afghan population will have to be central to that. The international recognition has not come forward, and I think that's a good stand. It needs to be conditionalized on national legitimacy of the government in Kabul. And the national legitimacy comes not only by sort of true inclusivity to the extent possible, but also delivering on the basic rights of women, but also men. We have to say that it's right now what we have in Kabul. It is certainly their policies with respect to women are extremely restrictive, but non-Taliban men are also excluded from opportunities. They can get educations, but jobs is within the government is not something that they could hope for. So internationals will have to take at least now, we hope, they didn't before the collapse, but now the Afghan the legitimacy, the national legitimacy, and the rights and opportunities of the Afghan population central to whatever deals they make.
Very much for that. And Jasteena, I'd like you to come in next on what is it, and very briefly, What is it that the UN women can do as they work in Afghanistan under these very difficult conditions? Do they negotiate a middle path? And does that work?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I do feel the need to say and to clarify, I think you know from my bio, I am a consultant with UN Women. So I do not represent Allison or anyone at UN Women politically or diplomatically. I've been retained to provide them legal advice on how to engage. So I'll answer that part of the question. I just want to make that clear to everybody. I'm an academic.
Absolutely clear.
And that's
you know
why
that you're not speaking on their behalf, but you're telling us what is it that they can do.
Exactly. So one of the things, as was pointed out just by Omer, is that there is definitely the desire to engage in some way. The problem is that to engage with the leadership with whom the UN women might have fundamentally different views on human rights or particular approaches is difficult, right? So bringing in people who have legal expertise like myself and Razia to speak to how to use the laws, and that's why I speak a lot, because I have a lot of, you know, you tell me to speak for 5 minutes, I speak longer, because it's academically looking at Sharia and the implementation of Sharia to find places within the law where there is some, I'm not even going to use the word middle ground, but some room for discussion. So one of the things that I think is really important and that the UN is engaged in particular the agency I work with, is under my remit, is to do empirical research on how the laws, for example, the civil code, the Ottoman civil code that's being used, the Majalla, and the other Sharia laws are being used and misused, and educate UN women and the internationals who do not know that this is an issue. So that's one thing. The second thing is, once that is understood, to find the forum to engage with those who are within the Taliban ranks, who wish to, with whom discussion can be had. At this point, and again, the UN women leadership can answer this better than me, trying to find someone to discuss these matters with is very difficult because of the way the leadership is structured. I'm not saying there aren't people within the leadership who would be willing to discuss law. And I can tell you that when I lived and worked in Afghanistan, I sat with many judges, conservative judges, and spoke to them about Sharia and the possibility of liberal applications of it. And then finally, I think as a bottom line, the important thing is to make it clear that harmful practices that are justified by Sharia are not acceptable. Yes. And I think that's where everything sort of comes to a head.
Right.
And that's the problem. So what we're doing is giving them that advice in writing and in meetings.
Thank you so very much. That's I'm going to leave, and unfortunately we are running out of time. So I hope we'll have a few minutes at least for a Q&A, but I'm going to now ask the most difficult question to Afrasiab Khattak, which is, we've talked on the other side of the border of the reality of the Taliban and the need to engage with them because of the recognition of the reality. On this side of the border, should Pakistani Pashtuns recognize the reality of the Pakistani Taliban or not?
Thank you very much. We really seriously respect the right of Afghan people to decide whether a government, or those who claim to be a government, is a legitimate government or not. It's for Afghans. We're not here to decide this. I mean, no one elsewhere in the world, neither New York, nor in Paris, nor in other places. It's for Afghans. In Afghanistan, they can decide. That's very clear. But on this side, I think it's very clear that the question that you earlier asked, this peace uprising, it started in 2018 when Pashtun Tahaffuz movement was born in Waziristan. Mostly, I mean, other places, but mainly in Waziristan. So people of Waziristan broke the fear. You see, nobody could speak, nobody could say, Pakistani generals are behind this. So everybody would just hint very broadly, but nobody would say clearly. So it was people of Waziristan who started it. But then it spread. Now it is a general movement. And as I said, people of Swat, credit goes to people of Swat who have raised the flag of peace. It's peace uprising, peace movement. And people of the Pashtunkhwa, majority of them are supporting it. They are supporting it because it's not just Taliban, it's Talibanization. Talibanization means, even in our part of Pashtuns, I mean, east of Dhillon line, there are elements who were encouraged by Taliban in Afghanistan, and they started putting restraints on women's movement. They say women could not go to bazaar, for example. Women can do this and women cannot do this. I mean, these things started here also. So people are resisting, but I think it's very important for the rest of Pakistan to stand up with people of, support people of Pashtunkhwa in this peace movement. Because Talibanization will not stop at Attak. It will not stop at Indus River. It will cross, as it in the past we have seen. It reached Karachi in 2010, 2011, 2012. We know how 40% of Karachi gave tax to Taliban. It can happen again. In our province, they are taking extortions. Our chief minister, I mean, he is supposed to be giving money to them. Ministers, members of parliament, many people have been attacked. Those who do not pay money are attacked. Their houses are attacked. And even a PTI MPA from Dir was attacked. He survived, his brother and 3 other people were killed because they did not pay money. So you see, this is something which will come over to Islamabad. It will come to Lahore. It will go to Karachi. So it has to be stopped. And for that, I think we need our democratic movement, political parties, civil society in Pakistan, media. We will request them to support this movement because it is in our common interest. It's our giant struggle for peace and democracy in Pakistan. We need to put a stop to Taliban and Talibanization. And we need to raise voice against our country once again becoming a frontline state. You see, this frontline state addiction, we have to overcome this. From last 40 years, we have been facing this. It's a high time that we become a normal country focused on economic development, having the best of relations with Afghanistan and respect the sovereignty of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is our dear neighbor and we should be the closest friends, but not at the cost of Afghanistan's freedom. I mean, we should respect that, and I hope that is the sane way. I hope people in Pakistan will support this.
So there's a message of peace for both countries and a message also that civil society plays a crucial role in bringing about peace. We literally have about 3 minutes for questions. So I'll start with that, Jen.
We all know, the world know, that Taliban is backed by Pakistan and it's still backing. And how the world, how the international community deal Pakistan with this crime of supporting and creating Taliban?
अफरसियाब मेरे ख्याल है आपसे ये क्वेश्चन पूछा जा रहा है कि सबको पता है कि पाकिस्तान ने तालिबान को सपोर्ट किया है और उसके बारे में कुछ किया क्यों नहीं जाता आपको पता है मगर कुछ करती
अच्छा जी I think you are right. I mean, it's a common knowledge because it's an old project. And you see the factories that are producing Taliban in Pakistan are the same factories that were installed by Western countries and Arab money in 1980s. So the production has been going on, and everybody knows this is not a secret. You're right. But I think other countries have their own interests in this. As I earlier said, this is big power game because it's tussle between West, Russia and China, and those countries want to stop these big powers, contain them as they used to contain the Soviet Union in 1980s. The same thing they are doing now against China and Russia. So that's why many other countries, Western countries in particular, they are silent on this Taliban question.
Thank you. I think we have, if you could get those two questions and very, very brief, and because we really have to conclude this session. Thank you.
My question is Mr. Omer. Sir, I just need your comments on the relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan, keeping in view the current scenario. How do you see the relationship between two countries?
Our panelists here and our experts answer that question, and then really we have to wind up the session. So please, Mahbouba and Omer, how is that relationship between Pakistan and Afghanistan considered that side of the border? Yeah. Let me put it this way.
Let me share with you the feeling of the Afghan people. The Afghan people believe that in the past 40 years, any misfortune that has fallen on that country, Pakistan had a role in it. And therefore, by and large, the Afghan population is disappointed in Pakistan. And that doesn't mean that Pakistan population, that's Pakistani state. In Pakistan, when it comes to Afghanistan, the policies are focused not on the Afghan population, not on how to make them friends, how to win their hearts and minds. It's focused on how to have somebody in the Afghan palace who is, for the lack of a better word, obedient to Pakistan, or let's say runs by. And that whoever actually comes to the palace and to as the head of the state, eventually they will have to be mindful of the sentiments of its own people. And when the people are not happy, that it gets reflected in them as well. And that leads to a relationship that becomes strained. In 1990s, the Mujahideen went from Pakistan, and yet after a year or two, the relationship with the Mujahideen became strained. With the Taliban, initially sure, but eventually in the collapse of the Taliban, Pakistan helped. And now we have a situation where certainly Pakistan believes that the palace in Kabul is a lot friendlier, but it's not a relationship that you can take it for granted. I mean, it could change any day or any time.
Absolute last word to Mahbouba on this particular question, and then we are going to wind up the session.
It breaks my heart to see that between the two countries, that we are neighbors, and the people are so much alike, there is supposed to be such a big rift that the way it has been created now. I cannot tell you how sad that makes me, honestly. Pakistan and Afghanistan could be the best of friends to each other. We actually need each other. in the positive way, not in the negative way. Don't use the Afghans, Pakistani brothers and sisters, as in a negative way, because you will create an enemy that the war of it will never stop until the world goes on, and I want you to know that. You might think that we are really weaker now. You might think that we don't have anything to offer to the world, but that's not who we are. So don't do that. Be our friend. Please be our friends. We need you to be our friends. We need you to take our hands. We will take your hands. Let's make it possible together. Otherwise, we are going to destroy ourselves. And that will be such a big pity, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be Pakistan that is going to be happily looking. It's going to be some other country like China, United States, or someplace outside that they are going to say, ha ha, did you see what we did in that part of the world? So come on, guys. Let's be friends, because that's what we can do.
What better way to end a session in the Asma Jahangir conference? So thank you very much. No, we did.
Ma'am, that is last question only.
Sorry, we've run out of time. The session is ended, but please do thank this fantastic panel.